Are EVs the future, do you think, from a Ford perspective, or is full electric the future? Or do you see a progression through both of them? Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us again. And we have noticed that Ford is more than doubling its investment in electric and autonomous vehicles, totaling 29 billion rand. And Ford globally increased its investment in electric and autonomous vehicles, as I said, $29 billion, which equates to 422 billion rand. That is a big number. I don't even know how many zeros that has. The automaker has previously committed to spending $11.5 billion on electrifying its vehicle lineup through 2022. Now, Ford says that it spent double that amount while extending the timeline to 2025. So what does this mean for the South African automotive industry and overall for the South African EV future? And I'm very, very fortunate and lucky enough to be joined once again by Neale Hill. And I'll let Neale do his own introduction. Welcome again, Neale. And I'm looking forward to speaking to you, Managing Director for Ford Southern and Sub-Saharan Africa. Did I get that right?
Yeah, George, got that right, and really good to be with you again, and just appreciate the opportunity to talk things automotive and the industry in general.
Yeah, I look forward to these because it gives us an opportunity to really ask some questions that people might not be aware of, and I suppose the first question, Neale, is Ford and the electric vehicle future in South Africa. What is Ford's outlook, and does Ford see an electric vehicle future in South Africa?
So, George, the short answer is yes. I think that, with the reality is that South Africa as an industry, and if you look at it in terms of all the 7 OEMs that are represented in South Africa, are very integrated into the global automotive industry. And given the pace of change that's happening elsewhere in the world, it is only natural that South Africa is going to follow suit. And I know a lot of people will be sitting there scratching their heads and going, geez, Eskom, load shedding, all of those sorts of things. How does electric vehicles fit into South Africa? Where do we see this all, playing out? But the speed with which the global industry is shifting is going to be something that is going to dictate to us that we're going to need to move very quickly as well. So I definitely see electric vehicles in South Africa's future. And I think we're going to see a rapid acceleration probably in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think that the second half of this decade is going to see a really rapid acceleration.
Well, second half of this decade, to put that in perspective, that is 2025, 26 onwards, right?
Correct.
Which is really around the corner. We're in 2021 already. So how do OEMs adapt to this EV future? And, more particularly Ford, how do you see yourselves adapting to this EV future? Given the following context, we are a manufacturer or assembler of motor vehicles, and we supply a lot of Europe and a lot of the East with vehicles from South Africa. And more than 65% of our vehicles manufactured in South Africa actually go to those markets, which means that we have to retool our plants. We have to, do all of those things in order to, first of all, hang on to that 65%, because we know that the UK said by 2030 they've put the gauntlet down, no more ICE vehicles, and a lot of countries in Europe have said a similar thing. And we are very good at producing internal combustion engine vehicles. So that's the first question. The second question is, how are OEMs going to adapt for our local market? Because EVs are expensive. And how is Ford seeing that future?
Okay. So the first question, right off the bat, I think that, you hit the nail on the head there in terms of the way that the South African automotive industry is structured is that, based on our production and the volume of vehicles that flow out, we've got to make sure that the vehicles that we produce in South Africa are suitable for our export market customers. And with that index and with the legislation that's coming to play in a lot of the European markets, and when you think that there's a huge chunk of our locally produced vehicles that are exported that end up in Europe, that is going to be a key driver in terms of the change that we believe is going to start happening. So that whole process is really something that the industry is looking at. We're having very detailed discussions, not only with the government, but also with the Department of Transport, with Eskom as well, in terms of what does the future look like. And then also remembering that as part of the Automotive Master Development Plan, or APDP2, there is also a technology component to the Automotive Investment Scheme, or AIS incentives that exist. So the government is also encouraging automotive manufacturers in South Africa to localize production, adopt new technologies, and really look to keep South Africa relevant in the automotive space as a producer of vehicles for export. So I see a number of different things sort of working in tandem with each other and in synergy with each other, in particular as we look to really start transforming the vehicles that we produce in South Africa, and how we're going to match the demands of the future markets globally. So I think it's going to be a combination of a number of factors. And that's why I think, right up front, I said that I think we're going to start seeing an acceleration. And certainly in the second half of this decade, we're going to see a lot of acceleration going forward in terms of the type of vehicles that are produced in South Africa, switching from internal combustion engines to hybrid and full electric vehicles as well as we go forward.
So,
the second part.
Before you get on to the second part of my question, I'm at the moment, Volvo's kindly lent me a Volvo XC90, the hybrid version for 2 or 3 days, and are EVs the future, do you think, from a Ford perspective, or is full electric the future? Or do you see a progression through both of them?
Well, Ford have very publicly stated that we haven't really picked a single technology, if you could call it that way, to lay our bets, betting all on black or red if you're a roulette player. But what Ford have done is we've looked at it on the basis of hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and battery electric, and we've looked to push and develop all of those technologies simultaneously. However, when you look at where some of the trends are going and just the vehicles that we're starting to release, you can definitely see that full battery electric vehicles are certainly going to be a vehicle that's going to feature very prominently in not only our stable, but also the stables of other manufacturers as well. The case in point is the Mustang Mach-E, which we've just started delivering in North America, to a very positive reaction from consumers there. So I think, if you have a look at it in terms of people looking to go really green in terms of vehicles that they're driving, the full battery electric certainly is a very attractive option.
And Ford is squarely positioning themselves to take advantage of that future. Given
100%, we're investing in all of those different technologies, and making sure that we're in a position to actually compete very effectively in those segments. And I think Mustang Mach-E is a classic example where instead of taking an existing vehicle and then retrofitting a battery electric system with the batteries, we designed a vehicle from the ground up and are in the process of launching it right now which is a purpose-built full electric vehicle with all the capabilities in terms of battery storage, range, which is over 550 kilometers on the vehicle, if I remember correctly, with performance to boot as well.
That's brilliant. The Ford Mustang has to remain a legend in the battery electric future. It would be a sad day if the Mustang died a death of fuel. Then my second part of my question a little bit earlier was around the local economy and the challenges faced there, because we've got to retool our plants to keep the 65% or so of our exports. But what about local demand? How is Ford looking at the local country in terms of battery electric or even hybrids, and getting stimulation and demand from consumers?
I think, George, that's one of the big challenges that we all of the OEMs are wrestling with right now is, in terms of the adoption and let's call it the price barrier that exists right now in terms of getting people to the point that they can actually afford a battery electric vehicle. And that's something that we're having huge discussions right now with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition around what does that future look like. Because currently, if you just go the imported route, battery electric vehicles attach a 25% import duty, plus then on top of that, you've got the ad valorem tax that goes along with that. So by the time you land a vehicle in South Africa as a full battery electric, you're facing, quite a hefty fee on those particular vehicles, which then limits the size of the market potential that exists in South Africa. So that's one of the early areas that we've really got to look at is how do we make battery electric vehicles more accessible? How do we get them down to a point where people are able to actually afford vehicles and put more battery electric vehicles on the road? Because I think scale is going to be absolutely crucial. The second key component to that question really is looking at how do we then start changing our manufacturing operations to look at building battery electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles in South Africa, and what are those components that we can localize, because that's going to be the key element in terms of really driving down costs in terms of making vehicles more affordable. So that's going to be the critical thing. And I know that one of our competitors already indicated that they're going to be building a hybrid vehicle locally in South Africa by the end of this year, which I think is hugely exciting news for the industry. Yeah. So that's something that we look forward to and watching this space develop very quickly.
Lovely. And, a third or fourth question, I can't remember what number we're on now, but, I don't like pitting manufacturers against this particular car maker, but, the elephant is in the room, and they're the only car maker that did it, and that is Tesla, going direct to the consumer. And I know that BMW has changed their model from, or is testing changing their model from a full franchise model to an agency model, where the car stock is a fleet amongst all of the dealerships, and no longer has to be owned by that dealership, and that agency model exists. Tesla's really got it right, but they are a new kid on the block, and they started out the gates in that way. How does Ford see the future of going direct to the consumer?
George, I think it's a really interesting space, and I think it's something that I don't think anybody has cracked the code 100%. And I think that there's pros and cons to both both scenarios. If you go the full direct route that Tesla's gone, where there's no middleman, and they're selling directly to the customers versus the traditional franchise dealer model. I think that this is something that is going to evolve over time, where and how the future shapes itself out. Not brave enough to predict that right now, but I think certainly there's going to be components of it that are going to challenge the status quo the way it exists. I think COVID over the last year has certainly taught us that customers are very keen to interact electronically via the digital platform. And I think that that's going to be a space that everybody's going to need to embrace in some form or fashion. And I think that that's where you're going to start seeing a huge blurring of the lines, where customers are going to be placing orders for vehicles online and dealing directly with the manufacturer. But it could be that the dealer is a delivery agent and different elements like that. But right now, our model says that we have a dealer network that we will continue to support. And, with our car park that we have in existence in South Africa, we've got a very long and proud tradition in terms of looking after our customers and making vehicle, service available to our customers. But we'll continue to watch that space very carefully. Tesla certainly is challenging the industry perceptions and the norms. And I think it forces everybody to have a look at it. And I think one of the things that we in Ford Motor Company welcome is that disruptive force, because it means that we've got to sit back and assess whether our model is still current, relevant, and applicable or not. So it's always interesting to see a disruptive force like Tesla coming into the marketplace.
Well, I'm very keen to watch this space because a lot of businesses in South Africa, including ours, AutoTrader, thrive off the back of car dealerships, and I think there's a lot of parts of the value chain that will get disrupted in a model like that. So I hope it changes for the good and for the better. And I think if everybody keeps their finger on the pulse, you don't have to lose in a scenario like that. You could win.